London, 1814. The city glimmered like a crown of fire beneath a frozen sky, its carriages gleaming with frost, its palaces trembling with candlelight and rumor. The Queen's midwinter ball was the event of the season, the one night when power disguised itself as grace, and beauty became a weapon sharper than any sword. Inside the grand ballroom of St. James's Palace, chandeliers swayed with the soft hum of hundreds of whispers. Diamonds flashed, silk rustled, and the air shimmered with perfume and expectation. Every step, every glance, was a calculation. And into this world of gold and judgment stepped a girl who did not belong. Lady Eleanor Whitcomb paused beneath the marble archway, her gloved fingers trembling around her dance card. Her gown, midnight blue, faintly frayed at the seams, was the best her aunt could manage after pawning the last of the family's silver. Her shoes pinched. Her heart raced. She was the daughter of a fallen viscount, the niece of an ambitious woman determined to resurrect a name already buried by debt. Her aunt's last words before the carriage door shut still echoed in her mind. Smile, child. Tonight you must not simply attend, you must survive. Every head seemed to turn when she entered. Not in admiration, but in recognition of her vulnerability. She was new blood among wolves. The gentlemen whispered of her fortune, or lack thereof, while the ladies, veiled behind lace fans, measured her in silent cruelty. Eleanor moved as though through water, each motion heavy with self-consciousness. She tried to appear serene, though her pulse thundered like a trapped bird in her chest. At the center of the ballroom, the orchestra tuned its strings. The air shifted. Anticipation, reverence, fear. Someone had arrived. A murmur rolled through the crowd, soft at first, then swelling into something electric. The Duke of Wessex is here. The name spread like fire through silk. Conversations faltered, laughter died. Even the Queen's courtiers turned to look. Adrian Blackwell, Duke of Wessex, entered with the composure of a man used to being both revered and reviled. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his uniform cut with military precision though he no longer wore the colors of war. The faint scar beneath his left eye caught the candlelight, a small reminder of the battlefield that had made him legend. Whispers trailed in his wake. The Iron Duke, the cold commander of Waterloo, the man who broke Napoleon's flank and never smiled again. Eleanor tried not to stare, but the room seemed to tilt toward him, drawn by the gravity of his presence. His expression was unreadable, his gaze steady, as though the chaos around him were nothing more than noise. She had heard the tales, that he had once loved a woman who betrayed him, that he trusted no one, that his wealth and title were matched only by his solitude. And yet, for reasons she could not name, her eyes lingered. Something in his stillness unsettled her, as though he could see through the fabric of pretense binding everyone in the room. "Lady Whitcomb," murmured her aunt, snapping her fan open like a blade. "Do not stare. It is unbecoming. Men like him notice only what they wish to conquer." Eleanor lowered her gaze. "I meant no." "Smile," her aunt hissed, "and pray he doesn't notice you." But he did. It happened in a moment so swift it might have been imagined. The crowd shifted, the orchestra's opening waltz began, and in the turn of movement, the Duke's gaze caught hers. The air left her lungs. He did not look away. For the briefest instant, the room seemed to fall silent, the music muffled beneath the echo of her heartbeat. Then he began to walk, straight toward her. She froze. Around her, ladies curtsied, men bowed, every eye following the Duke's deliberate approach. Her aunt's fan stilled mid-air. Eleanor wanted to step back, to vanish into the shadows, but his stride held her in place like a command. When he reached her, he did not bow nor smile. His voice, when it came, was low and steady, a sound that seemed to reach the marrow. "Lady Whitcomb," he said, as though testing the weight of her name, "would you grant me the first waltz?" For a moment, she thought she had misheard him. The question rippled through the crowd like thunder through glass. 100 breaths were held in disbelief. Her aunt's face drained of color. The Queen's musicians faltered, then resumed with a trembling note. Eleanor's throat tightened. "Your Grace," she whispered, barely audible. "Surely there are others." "I asked you," he interrupted gently, Not others. The orchestra swelled, and she found herself accepting his gloved hand before she understood what she had done. His palm was warm, steady, and when he led her toward the center of the floor, the murmurs rose behind them in a storm of scandalized fascination. The Iron Duke had chosen a girl with no dowry, no pedigree of power, only courage enough to tremble. Their first steps were awkward. Eleanor tried to follow his lead, terrified of misstep, but the Duke's hand tightened at her waist, firm and protective. "Breathe," he murmured. The word, simple as it was, anchored her. The world narrowed to the slow circle of their movement, the scent of his cologne, smoke, cedar, something foreign, and the faint brush of his sleeve against her bare wrist. His gaze never left hers. It was not the look of a man admiring beauty, but of one reading truth. "You are afraid," he said quietly. "Yes, my lord," she confessed, unable to lie. "Good," he replied. "Fear makes us honest." The remark startled her into a laugh, a small, unguarded sound. Something softened in his expression, though it vanished as quickly as it appeared. Around them, the other dancers resumed, their skirts and coattails a blur of color and envy. Still, the Duke and Eleanor remained the focal point, two figures suspended in defiance of decorum. When the waltz ended, he released her hand but did not bow. "You dance as though every step is borrowed time," he said softly. "Do not waste it on dread." Then he turned, offered a curt nod to the Queen, and left the floor. The crowd parted for him, whispering furiously. Eleanor stood motionless, her breath shallow, her gloves damp with nervous sweat. Her aunt hurried to her side, whispering furiously about impropriety and ruin, but her voice barely reached Eleanor's ears. She could still feel the echo of his hand, the rhythm of that impossible dance. Above them, chandeliers flickered, their light trembling as though the palace itself sensed something had shifted. In a single waltz, the course of a quiet girl's life had been altered. The Duke of Wessex had chosen her, not with flowers, not with courtly praise, but with a silent gesture seen by all and understood by none. As the final notes faded, Eleanor lifted her eyes to the tall doors where he had vanished. For the first time that night, her hands were still. Somewhere in the crowd, someone whispered, half in awe, half in fear, "The Iron Duke does not dance for pleasure." And in the hush that followed, Lady Eleanor Whitcomb understood that her trembling had only just begun. The days following the Queen's midwinter ball passed in a blur of rumor and unease. London's drawing rooms, once alive with trivial chatter, now whispered a single name paired with another, Wessex and Whitcomb. The notion was absurd, scandalous, irresistible. That the Duke of Wessex, the war-forged recluse, had asked the impoverished daughter of a disgraced viscount for the first waltz, such a thing defied both reason and rank. And yet it had happened before 100 witnesses. What began as disbelief soon curdled into fascination. By the week's end, every lady of the ton knew precisely how Eleanor's gown had been mended, how her hands had trembled, and how the Duke's eyes had never once looked away. Lady Agatha Pembroke could scarcely contain her fury. To her, scandal was useful only when controlled, and this was anything but. She paced their small parlor, her skirts crackling like storm clouds. "He made a spectacle of you, Eleanor. You should have refused him. Graciously, modestly. Now they think you're bait." Eleanor, seated by the fire, said nothing. She watched the flames dance in silence, the memory of that night still alive in her chest, the music, the warmth of his hand, the calm authority in his voice. It had not felt like mockery. It had felt like being seen. "Perhaps he only wished to dance," she said softly. Lady Agatha scoffed. "Men like him do not wish. They decide. And once they've had their entertainment, they vanish. You would do well to remember that." But he did not vanish. 3 mornings later, as snow fell across Grosvenor Square, a knock sounded at their door. A liveried messenger stood in the cold, carrying a velvet box sealed with the crest of Wessex, a silver falcon in flight. Lady Agatha gasped as Eleanor broke the seal. Inside lay a single sapphire hairpin, its blue stone catching the pale light like captured ice. There was no letter, only a small card engraved with 2 words, "For courage." The aunt's outrage was immediate. "You will return it at once." To accept a gift from an unmarried man, especially that man, is to invite ruin. Eleanor held the pin in her gloved hand. It was simple, elegant, heavy with meaning. The Duke of Wessex was not a man who acted without intention. "He called me afraid," she murmured. "Perhaps this is an apology." Lady Agatha snatched the box. "It is a claim, Eleanor. Do you understand? A claim upon your name, your virtue, your reputation." But that evening, when her aunt retired, Eleanor took the box from the writing desk and hid it within her drawer. She told herself it was only curiosity. Yet when she fastened the pin into her hair the next morning, she felt something steadier than defiance. She felt seen, remembered. The days unfolded in uneasy rhythm. Wherever she went, the park, the dressmaker's, even the bookshop on Bond Street, she felt his gaze upon her. Once, near Hyde Park, his black carriage slowed beside hers. The window lowered, and his voice drifted out. "The sapphire suits you." Then the carriage rolled on, leaving her heart in chaos. London, however, was not forgiving. Invitations that had once trickled in now ceased entirely. Her aunt's friends grew distant, their polite smiles sharpened by envy and fear. The Tun thrived on cruelty disguised as courtesy, and Eleanor became its latest subject. At a small tea gathering, a duchess laughed too loudly and asked if she planned to marry into the army, since she has already conquered its general. The room erupted in laughter. Eleanor smiled faintly, swallowed her shame, and said nothing. That evening, she attended a winter soirée at Lord Pembroke's mansion, a last attempt, her aunt insisted, to prove her dignity remained intact. The ballroom was smaller than the Queen's, but no less cruel. She arrived in a modest white gown, the sapphire pin hidden beneath her curls. The moment she entered, conversation slowed. She felt the heat of every eye upon her. Yet among the glittering crowd, one presence steadied her. The Duke was there. He stood apart, near the window, his posture immaculate, expression unreadable. He wore no medals, yet carried the authority of one who had earned them all. When their eyes met, the world seemed to fall silent again, just as it had at the Queen's ball. Without a word, he crossed the room. The crowd parted instinctively. Eleanor braced herself. He stopped before her, inclined his head, and said, "Lady Whitcomb." "Your Grace," she managed, her voice low. He regarded her a moment, then said, "They speak ill of you." She swallowed. "They speak of what they do not understand." His gaze softened, if only for a heartbeat. "No, they understand perfectly. What they cannot forgive is that I see what they refuse to look at." Before she could reply, a lady nearby, Miss Lavinia Carrington, notorious for her sharp tongue, laughed loudly. "Tell me, Your Grace," she said, "is charity the newest fashion among dukes?" The insult hung in the air like smoke. Eleanor's breath caught, her aunt went pale. The Duke turned toward the source of the laughter, his voice calm but edged with steel. "Charity, Miss Carrington, is the virtue of those who give without seeking to wound. You might attempt it." A hush fell. Miss Carrington blanched. The Duke's words, delivered without raise of tone, cut deeper than any rebuke. He turned back to Eleanor. "Do not flinch from their cruelty," he said quietly. "Fear is a language they respect only when it belongs to them." Then he bowed, just enough to be proper, and walked away. The room exhaled. Eleanor stood trembling, not from fear, but from something dangerously like gratitude. Later that night, she returned home in silence. Her aunt ranted all the way, declaring that she had doomed them both, that the Duke's interference had branded her a scandal. But Eleanor barely heard. She could still feel the echo of his voice, the conviction beneath his restraint. Near midnight, unable to sleep, she crossed to the window. Snow fell in soft spirals outside. The street was quiet, until a flicker of movement caught her eye. A black carriage stood across the square, its lamps dimmed. For a moment she thought it an illusion. Then she saw him, Adrian Blackwell, seated within, his face faintly visible in the pale glow. He did not move, did not call out, merely watched. The gesture was neither threatening nor tender, only certain. She pressed her palm against the glass. Her breath fogged the pain. When she looked again, the carriage was gone. Eleanor stood there long after the last hoofbeat faded, the sapphire pin glinting faintly in her hair. The city outside slept beneath its shroud of snow, yet within her something restless had awakened, something between fear and longing, between ruin and hope. She did not yet know which would claim her. The days that followed blurred into a strange half-life, caught between silence and speculation. London's gossip circles burned hotter than ever, yet the Duke of Wessex remained conspicuously absent from all gatherings. His withdrawal only sharpened curiosity. Some said he had grown bored with his little charity project, others whispered that the Queen herself had summoned him for rebuke. Eleanor tried not to care. She told herself it was relief. Yet each morning she found herself glancing at the post, hoping for some trace of his hand, some sign that what she had felt in those brief moments had not been illusion. When none came, she resolved to forget him. She filled her days with small errands, visits to milliners, and long walks through Kensington Gardens, where the frost-laced trees stood like sentinels guarding their secrets. Still, memory clung to her. The sound of his voice, the warmth of his hand, it haunted her like a refrain she could not silence. It was on one such morning that she encountered him again. The air was sharp, the ground pale with snow. She had paused by the Serpentine, watching a flock of swans drift across the icy water, when the crunch of boots broke her solitude. She turned, and there he was. No carriage, no entourage, no ceremony. Only a man in a dark greatcoat, his breath misting in the cold. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. Then he inclined his head. Lady Whitcomb. She curtsied instinctively, though her pulse betrayed her composure. Your Grace. I fear I startled you. You did, she admitted, her voice soft. But then you often do. His mouth curved faintly, almost a smile, though restrained, as though the motion were unfamiliar. I have that effect, I'm told. A pause followed, filled only by the distant creak of branches. Then he said, May I walk with you? She hesitated. People will talk. They already do, he replied. Let us at least give them reason. And so they walked, slowly, side by side, their steps tracing narrow paths through the snow. The conversation, at first, was formal. The weather, the Queen's failing health, the state of the Thames. But beneath it flowed an unspoken current. Eleanor sensed it in the way he matched her stride, in the glances that lingered when he thought she would not notice. Finally, she said, Why do you persist, my lord? Surely you know what your attention has cost me. He stopped. What it has cost you, Lady Whitcomb, he corrected quietly. I am well aware. And I do not deny that my actions were reckless. But I do not regret them. She met his gaze. Then what is it you seek from me? Truth. The word startled her. Truth. He nodded. I have lived long enough among masks and flatterers. I've seen men die for crowns and women barter their souls for invitations. When I looked at you that night, trembling and proud, I saw no pretense. Only fear, and courage enough to admit it. Her throat tightened. You make me sound braver than I am. He studied her, the pale winter light catching the silver in his eyes. Bravery is not absence of fear. It is its mastery. For a moment, silence enveloped them. Then she asked, And what of you, your Grace? What is it you fear? The question seemed to strike deeper than she intended. He looked away toward the frozen water. Myself, he said at last. They walked on without speaking. The Duke's expression was distant now, and Eleanor sensed she had touched a wound that had never healed. Yet she felt no regret, only understanding. That night, as she returned home, her aunt's fury met her at the door. You were seen, Lady Agatha cried. Walking alone with him, in public. Eleanor removed her gloves calmly. We were in a park, Aunt. Others were present. Others? The Queen's cousin passed by, and now half of Mayfair believes you are his mistress. The words struck like a slap. Eleanor felt the ground tilt beneath her. That is false. False or not, it will ruin us, her aunt shrieked. You must end this madness before it destroys everything. But even as she nodded meekly, some quiet defiance stirred within her. The Duke had not touched her, had not even spoken of affection, and yet he had offered something rarer: respect, truth. And she could no longer pretend she did not crave it. The scandal ripened swiftly. Invitations ceased altogether. Acquaintances crossed the street to avoid her. The sapphire pin became both her shame and her shield. She wore it still, not out of pride, but as remembrance of the one man who had looked at her without calculation. Then, one afternoon, another letter arrived, and signed, written in an elegant, unfamiliar hand. Meet me at the river gate of Richmond House. Tomorrow, at dusk. Come alone. Her aunt forbade it. If he wishes to see you, he may come properly, through the front door. But Eleanor went. The air was heavy with mist, the Thames gleaming dark beneath the winter sky. She waited by the gate, heart pounding, until the faint rhythm of boots approached. The Duke emerged from the fog, his expression grim. "You should not have come," he said. "You asked me to." "I did not. Someone has used my name." Before she could reply, another figure stepped from the shadows, a tall man, elegantly dressed, his smile sharp as glass. "Adrian," he drawled, "I see your sense of chivalry remains intact." Eleanor froze. She recognized him from portraits. Lord Cavenhurst, the Duke's cousin and heir presumptive, long rumored to covet both his title and his fortune. "What is this?" she whispered. Cavenhurst's eyes glinted. "A lesson, my dear. You've made quite the stir, and my cousin here seems blind to the danger you pose. I thought it best you see his true nature." "Enough," the Duke said, stepping between them. "You will leave her out of your schemes." Cavenhurst laughed softly. "Oh, Adrian, ever the soldier. But even soldiers cannot command gossip or parliament. They whisper that you mean to marry her. Can you imagine? The Iron Duke undone by a penniless girl." His tone turned cold. "Withdraw your threat." "Or what?" The Duke's reply was quiet, lethal. "Or I shall forget we share blood." Cavenhurst paled, then sneered. "You've already forgotten everything else." He turned to Eleanor. "Take care, Lady Whitcomb. When men like him break, they break those nearest first." With that, he vanished into the mist. For a long time, neither she nor the Duke spoke. Then she said, "He's right about one thing. I bring you nothing but trouble." He faced her. "You bring me peace." Her heart trembled. "Then why do you look so burdened?" "Because peace, for men like me," he said softly, "is always bought at someone else's cost." A bell tolled from across the river. He stepped closer, his breath mingling with hers in the cold air. "You should not be seen with me again. The Queen is displeased, and my cousin will not stop until you are humiliated." "Then let him try," she whispered. "I have survived worse than laughter." He looked at her for a long moment, then bowed his head as though in surrender. "You are far braver than I, Eleanor." She smiled faintly. "You taught me fear makes us honest." The faintest warmth touched his eyes. Then he turned, disappearing once more into the fog. She stood motionless, her heart aching not with fear this time, but with the weight of something perilously close to love. And for the first time, she no longer trembled.